I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. The rain has finally ceased. The sun is out. Andrew Quo, are you fired up to see that burning star once again after the 72 hours of gloom?
Man, which burning stars of this week are we talking about? Jimmy Butler, the sun. Yo, it rained like crazy. I know talking weather is one of my fucking favorite things to do, actually, because it's like the Joe Blogs thing comes in. Like, everyone tries to predict the weather, and everyone thinks they know what they're talking about when it happens, but yo, it's a mysterious, brutal thing when you have 3 days of torrential downpour.
I did a lot of trudging. A lot of good damp trudging. Yesterday I think was the worst because
Like trudge.
I had to trudge around. And I'm not someone who keeps a lot of umbrellas on deck. I thought I could get away with a jacket with a hood, and it was fully besodden by the time I got to the train. And I felt very miserable, and I felt very bad for myself. In fact, I was the victim in my mind of rain, individually targeted by 3 days of downpour.
I got caught out in an open field, as one does with a small human being, with a really good rain jumpsuit. And he was just like having the best time, jumping through puddles, like, what is this fantastic thing that's happening? And I was standing there like you, in my Cookies Hoops sweatshirt, and my Cookies Hoops hat that said basketball on it, relevant to my interests, my sneakers, my pants, and just soaked to the bone. And for the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've had in my Amazon shopping cart a raincoat, but I can't pull the trigger because I can't decide whether to get a yellow one or a blue one, because the yellow one is infantilizing but nicer, but the blue one is boring but kind of more adult. So I just didn't buy it, and boy, was I paying for it.
Are you talking like big Paddington vibes? Didn't he have a yellow raincoat? Wasn't that his whole dealie?
Kind of. Now that he had a blue one, I believe. He had a red hat, and he has a blue coat. But he has yellow, I believe he has yellow boots. Paddington is... Yes.
I thought this was like another Berenstain Bears thing, except with like another Ursine childhood hero.
For at least 20 years of my life, after like Ian Mackay and like members of Rites of Spring, my style icon was Paddington Bear. I'm serious.
Well, I remember he used to love wearing wallaby shoes and Knicks shorts in some of his earlier classics.
I mean, this week we're coronating a new king, and it's good to remember the British drip lords of history. And even though Paddington, like, you cannot make fun of my Knicks shorts because Paddington had no pants. So I was just kind of modernizing Paddington's point of view.
Yeah, that's fair. I've never seen Paddington 2, and I feel like not only Jordan Rodelli, vacationing as usual, he claims it's the best movie ever. But I feel like a lot of people universally hail Paddington 2 as a phenomenal film, and I've never seen it. I would like to see it, but do I need to see Paddington 1?
Well, it was famous because I believe its Rotten Tomato rating was perfect for a few years, and people kept on feeding it to make it more perfect because it was funny. So I think that's what JR was saying. Meanwhile, JR's first round takes, wrong across the board. Shout out to Hot Dog Legs. Woof. The Timberwolves did not upset Nikola Jokic. Still waiting for the end of Succession, though. Someone will have to tell me what happens.
Apparently there is going to be a Paddington 3 as well.
They should make
that's
Paddington
gonna
7,
happen?
8, 9.
So have you seen Paddington 2, though? I've not. Again, I'm coming from a place of absolute ignorance as usual. You informed or not?
Uninformed. I've read all the Paddington. Well, I know about Paddington as a child, but I'm no longer a child, so I don't watch those movies. Heartbreaking story, orphan, really sad stuff. I really like this character, but I don't watch Paddington 1 or Paddington 2 because I'm not a child, even though I wear bright blue shorts that say the New York Knickerbockers on them. But
No, you respect him for his fashion sense, not his filmography.
yo, that coat, if they had like a stylish version of his blue coat, which they probably do, I wouldn't wear a hat like him, though. I think I would only wear baseball hats.
I don't. I have a raincoat somewhere, and then I think it's from like Studerheim, like the Swedish company, and it's very sort of like rubbery and thick, and I think it would be very effective against the rain, but I never really wear it because it's so rain resistant that all the water goes down the torso of this long jacket and then ends up like on your legs.
Yeah, I know. You got to wear boots too. Are raincoats just for the Gordon fishermen and children? This is my question. Like, can an adult like me who doesn't shuck oysters, go clamming for a living, root for the Celtics? Oh, and I'm no longer a child, clearly, even though my interests may contradict that idea. Is a raincoat an adult item?
This is a real nuanced take of the classic conundrum. Are umbrellas sus?
I mean, I love my umbrella, but I always lose it, so I opt for a baseball hat.
Yeah, that's typically my strategy. I think Jordan stole the last good umbrella I had, and I left it at a restaurant that he was working at. And then he like denied taking it, and everyone's like, "No, I saw him walk out with it." But he's probably using it as a parasol somewhere right now to
That's right.
keep the tropical sun off of his milky limbs.
So is it? Are they?
I feel like it depends on if you're twirling.
Oh,
If
okay.
you're walking down the street and you've got an umbrella and you're just diligently stomping along, but once you like hop a puddle or do a couple little twists, then you're in danger of being accused of susness with your umbrella.
I had a Winnie the Pooh umbrella when I was a little kid that I loved. The handle was Winnie, also a character with no pants. The character, talk about sus. The handle was Winnie the Pooh, and then it was a bright yellow, thick plastic like form. You know I don't know what part of the umbrella you call that, but I loved it so much that I used it until kind of like my early teens.
Oh, wait. Which part of the umbrella are you referring to?
Just like the part that keeps you dry. What,
The
canopy part.
the gallant.
Is it the gallant?
No.
I don't know. What? My umbrella game is also sus.
I think calling that the gallant is nice though.
Yeah.
Because
I don't.
are you getting wet? Allow me, and you bring the gallant slightly over their head as well to keep them from getting wet, and you'd be holding it by the stem.
The stem, right. Yeah, I don't know the anatomy of an umbrella, but I'm an umbrella fan. I'm gonna get all this stuff. I think I'm gonna get boots. I'm gonna do everything Paddington would do, except wear pants. I will wear pants.
I think it's fine if you were gonna, crouch under an umbrella in a rainstorm, like smoking cigarettes and, like trying to solve a crime that involves, I don't know, a dame who came into your office and then vanished. Like that, those are totally adequate uses for an umbrella. But yeah, as soon as you prance, like that both feet leave the ground at the same time, then your umbrella might be sus.
What if there's
Kind of like a travel rule. You know what I mean?
What if there's another Knicks game 1 in the second round, and there's a torrential downpour, and I show up wearing a yellow raincoat, an umbrella, a Winnie the Pooh umbrella, and Super Mario Brothers shoes? What would you say to that? This is the coronation of the king.
It's a drip inside and out.
Have you seen anyone wearing these Mario shoes talking about the drip of fictional children's characters?
In real life, no. I've seen, like I feel like Diplo or Billy Skateboard, a few people we know wearing them on social media. I don't
Are you talking
know
about
that
the
I've
Mega
seen,
Man shoes or the Mario shoes?
I'm talking about the big red ones.
Right. I think after that they did the Mario ones, man.
So you keep bringing up Mario.
That's right.
Are you going to see the movie? Have you seen it? I feel like we're just going down this path of discussing movies that we haven't seen, and I'm here for it.
I quickly scanned it because someone posted the whole thing in decent resolution on Twitter. They're like, all right, I'm just going to post this whole thing. And people started reposting it. So I think I was just like standing around doing nothing. And I was like, I'll just watch this movie. And I kind of quickly scanned it. Pretty good.
So wait, they put up the entire
Hour
movie.
and a half. Yeah. They're just like, fuck it. I'm going to get busted for this. But Elon Musk, right? Here we go.
Interesting. I think, I don't know, when I've talked to my family members who have kids, they've said that they were sort of shocked by how even kids who have never played video games or really even know who Super Mario is were demanding to see the movie. And I don't even think they're like wholly subjected to advertising campaigns. It was just this word of mouth thing where Super Mario is like Batman to children. He is an interestingly iconic character that in some ways I feel like has even been stripped away from, maybe the original video game franchise, and he's just Superman or, another one of these characters that will be eternal despite coming initially from the world of gaming.
Like Pokemon, kind of, right? Like it's become like a teddy bear, but it was a part of a game originally. Yeah, I mean, it's a topic of discussion only because like it made so much money that had movie people and money people being like, okay, what the hell happened here? Did we just not do everything right before this, or is Super Mario too big to fail, or is this an untapped market that we're looking to like jumpstart an industry that's kind of bricking, right? So there's all these thought pieces about why this is working and why this isn't. But I always come back to like, there's a lot of kids out there at any point, and they all need something. And I would certainly take my 2 to 6 year old anybody in my house to see this movie.
Well, I'm curious as to why the Super Mario Brothers movie from 1993.
Bob Hoskins?
Yeah, that kind of bricked, right?
I believe so, but I think I also saw that in the theater. But it was the era of poorly done. It was before CGI was a thing, and we also got that really bad version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with not Jim Henson costumes. It was a transitional kind of period for movies.
So apparently, and this is not my opinion, this is just Wikipedia, just verbatim here. Says the production innovated and introduced many filmmaking techniques now considered pivotal in the transition from practical to digital visual effects. And then it says, although appearing on several lists of the worst films ever made, it developed a following over the years and has been reappraised by some as a cult classic. That all sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, did you ever see the Garbage Pail Kids movie?
No, again, we have really nailed this. Here are movie after movie after movie to discuss.
I've seen them all. I've seen them all.
fine.
I have
What
not
about
seen Paddington 2,
I was going to say, what about Paddington 2?
which I heard is a classic. But the Garbage Pail Kids movie is insane. Just Google the imagery of that. I know this is radio, but like, it was phenomenal, man. You think Jabba the Hutt was hilarious? This Garbage Pail Kid stuff, and I think they got into some sort of caper, and they collected themselves as a team, and there was success at the end. You know, the movies.
I love capers. Got no issue from capers with me, but maybe it's just that we're adults now, and the stuff that we're talking about from 1993 is just from a different era. But
Like John Starks, Charlie Ward, Garbage Pail Kids.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I liked when the Knicks were like, yeah, the Heat and New York played when we were like 2 years old or haven't been born. So no, we're not really that interested in hearing about PJ Brown.
Okay, what happened? Well, they got into a fight and there was a skirmish. Like, and it's like, well, that's about it. It's like, that's it? That's it.
Yeah, how does that make you feel? Wow.
Yeah. And then there was another fight. But these are really nice guys. And then Alonzo Mourning got sick. And then we forgot about the whole thing because time moves on.
But back then, maybe it was the same. We just were of a different age group. But it does feel today as if adults seem to have trouble differentiating between entertainment for kids and that for grown-ups. You know, the amount of times people will talk about, I don't know, Putin invading Ukraine or something horrific and use Harry Potter analogs.
Right.
Like, why are we doing this? Why are people unable to grasp the real world without cloaking it in like child's fiction? It's bizarre to me.
I don't know if it's because I have a kid, but I have recently distinctly tried to reconnect with some of my feelings as a kid. Maybe to to be able to relate to new people in my life better. But I have been doing specific things, and the people I've talked to about this are just like, do it. It doesn't harm anybody. It's not lame. You're already lame. There's no being cool anymore in life. And I was like, these things make me so happy, and these things are like so boring. I don't want to fall asleep talking about them in a.
Can we give an example of one of them? I'm just like ballpark.
Instead of gambling on sports games, I am now purchasing collectible sports memorabilia.
Yeah, I knew you were up to that.
I know you do. It makes me really happy. I find it relaxing. I just copped a Mikal Bridges signed auto. It makes me really happy, and it is part of my. I did watch the Mario Brothers movie on my iPhone, and back in '93, that would have made me really excited.
Well, I'll say this: as someone who has mature passions, such as collecting autographed glossies of Dennis Franz, I can only look in scorn and revulsion.
Are we doing a basketball pod or not? But I do feel shame, man. Also, I do this thing with food all the time. I have this one dish that reminds me of my dad, and I eat it like a couple times a year, which is white udon noodles with Prego. It has to be Prego jarred sauce, ground beef, and 2 pieces of American cheese. Because my dad did not know what he was doing. It's a Mario. He'd be in the kitchen, be like, I'm going to cook you an Italian feast that will blow your side. Are we in Venice? Are we in Bologna? And I loved it so much because I loved him and I loved this food, and I was fucking psyched that he did something for me like that. So I have it like once or twice a year.
Remember there was that trend, and maybe it's still continuing. This was relatively recently. But there were all these restaurants opening up in specifically Prospect Heights. adjacent neighborhoods. That seemed to be the real epicenter of this disgusting trend, where restaurants were opening up that were ostensibly for adults, but were very childish in their approach. And one of these we talked about was Brooklyn Hots, which perverted the good name of the garbage plate.
That word again. J. Rue the Dammer just like rolling in my brain right now. It's tough, man. Primo.
The perverted monks. Now that was a perfect pod.
Woo. Hopefully we can do better this time, but we're off to a great start.
But yeah, I think in discussing this at times, and I can't remember if it was on Twitter or in IRL, when I was bringing this up to someone, and they said, well, millennials, or at least a segment of millennials, lived through a recession, they lived through war, and their childhood was sort of stripped away, and that's why there's this appeal of childlike things, of Harry Potter, novelty restaurants, maybe Super Mario would fall into this, Marvel Comics, and that may be true. That was a theory that was posited, and I don't deny it. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Of course. Go off. Yeah. I mean, what was the next thought after that? Why?
I think it was this idea that that millennials had been thrust into a world that was unideal, and they had like lost some of their childlike innocence, and this was a way to reclaim it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in a roundabout way, this is what I was thinking as I was staring at my window at this torrential downpour. And I wasn't talking about the heat draining shots, Max Strus at the Garden. And I thought that, like, a lot of my life has been dictated by the physical spaces that I am in, whether that be my apartment, Madison Square Garden, a bar. And space is like the ultimate luxury and the ultimate sign of wealth. Obviously, we know this, right? And I think about the mental space that we have, because we don't have to go to war, all this stuff that boomers talk about, the stresses that they have. I mean, we have debt and all this, but we don't even have enough money to go into debt sometimes, because like no one's buying homes and whatever, all this stuff. And I think about the space that we occupy, on the unlimited space we occupy online. It's like, well, I have a crappy apartment, and I have a really weird neighborhood I live in, but I have like a high-speed modem, and I log on and I talk to the world, whatever. It's kind of still blows my mind, my old-ass mind. And then the space that it gives you kind of mentally allows you the flexibility to kind of go backwards and to enjoy the things that like you had before all this bullshit. And I think it makes total sense that people get hyped up for the Flash movie.
There was a viral clip from the last day or two that showed people, and I want to say it was in Chicago, but I'm not sure. It was a large American city. It was people on a local news broadcast who were queuing up to watch Return of the Jedi. So this was in 1983, maybe. I'm not a big Star Wars guy, but I believe that was the year when that came out. I could be wrong, but it was around.
You're right. Boom! It was a test, and you passed.
So 83, and there were a few interesting things about that clip, and one of them, of course, was that there's no cell phones. They just didn't exist in the way that they do today. Obviously, people are waiting in lines. They're very present. They're very excited about seeing Star Wars, which of course was a mammothly popular movie franchise. And I saw people trying to interpret that today, and they're saying this shows that like nerd culture can work. Like that's the exact wrong takeaway from this. Mm-hmm. These aren't nerds. Mm-hmm. These are normal people, and this was a enormous sci-fi franchise, maybe the biggest in history, at its largest moment, when it was like exploding onto the scene and creating a new paradigm. It's like, look at these nerds, like that could work today. I'm like, wait a minute, but the nerds have been victorious. Like, it was such an odd take to see this clip of normal people lining up to see a sci-fi movie and saying, here's proof that movies for nerds could work.
So I've been thinking about that a little bit. You reminded me, and I'm glad for it, because I'm trying to work this out. Like, in 2023, if you bring up like something that I don't think was very popular at the time, let's say like ska, or even like, I apologize before because I always do this, grime, whatever, you know, it's like not insanely popular stuff, jungle, drum and bass. But you have 2 decades of people with time to consume this, and all you need is like 20 minutes. So everybody, just because of some curiosity and distance from the thing, become experts. So if you say Ian MacKaye now, everyone's like, okay, I can rank all Fugazi records. I'm like, right, because you started listening to them like 5 years ago, and you can do this. You're an expert now. And I think of the Revenge of the Nerds thing that you're talking about. And there's only a few nerds out there. Like, nerds are, of course, nerds are not likable people. They're on the spectrum. They are not like these sensitive artists or thinkers or mathematicians. They're just like grouchy ass specific people like myself. And I was watching the Red Rocks Skrillex show footage. 5 hours, starts during the day. He's having a moment, did MSG, Coachella, we've talked about this, but he did a Red Rock show. And in the crowd, it looked like the same people who sit courtside at Knicks playoff games, which is like a bunch of Rob Morrows. Remember Northern Exposure?
Yeah.
That show? It's like a bunch of characters from that show. Like, kind of like decent looking, middle class, wealthy people who have heard of Ian MacKaye, who are down for dubstep, and when a drum and bass part comes into a 5-hour DJ set by Skrillex, they're just like, yeah, I know this song because I've had 20 years to consume it. So everyone kind of becomes a nerd, right? But in reality, to your exact point, it is just living.
There was another thing that was notable about that video that I wanted to bring up because it's interesting, is that people talk differently. And I know this was Chicago, and there may be a Chicago accent of sorts. There's the Bears, there's the Saturday Night Live caricature, but the inflections were more notable than the actual accent itself. And I hadn't really thought about there being an 80s voice until somewhat recently. When you watch movies from the 70s or 60s and you hear news shows or you see clips from people, there's a very specific way that people talk in the 70s. And I don't know the sort of phonetic terms for how to describe it, but almost the cadence is reversed from today, if that makes sense.
The McNeil Lauer News Hour. Remember that on PBS?
Mm-hmm. There's even like 70s actresses, the way they talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know. I can't really even impersonate it right because I haven't really tried. But it's like, it's a real beautiful today. It's a real beautiful day today. Like this, I don't know. There's
wow.
I don't know if that's quite right. But you know what I'm trying to do though. It like tails upward.
Diane
almost.
Keaton.
Yeah, Diane Keaton is the perfect example of that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one for the 80s too, and I was noticing it in that video, and I again can't even impersonate it. But why do people change the way they talk over time? Is it social media for us? Is it YouTube? Like what are these like homogenizing factors? Is it cable TV switching to becoming omnipresent versus like local TV? I haven't put much thought into this.
As someone who's trying to bring back the word swagger, I would say it is, and like I don't talk like I used to speak 10 years ago either. It's the people I'm around. If I spend a lot of time with somebody from New Orleans, I'll end up saying some weird stuff that I'm like, what the hell was that? Like, I think that's just what humans do. They, like, as we always talk about on the show, they parrot each other. I think better way of saying that is like it's a song that you hum, and you hum the cadence to it, and it becomes part of your life. It is no longer something you're a fan of. It is you, right? So language is my favorite thing. A lot of times when we argue about stuff on social media or IRL, we're really arguing about wording and language and framing. And it's awesome. I just think, for example, when I hang out with Hot Dog Legs, I'm making wild takes that no one's ever heard of. It's the brother that we haven't seen since season 2. That's the winner of the show. Like, I start not only speaking like I'm on permanent vacation, but thinking like I'm on permanent vacation.
Oh, you think it's a bunch of codswallop, mate? Have you noticed that there is a like TikTok voice, IG Reels voice, whatever it is, YouTube voice, and that
I was
clearly,
at the mall.
Well, there's that. There's like the artificial voice. But I'm talking about the, hey guys.
Oh, yeah.
They all talk the same way, and I don't think people talked like that 10 years ago, and people certainly didn't talk like that 20 years ago. And I don't know what it's from or who invented it or the way that it is like metastasized across sort of like public speaking, but it's certainly a thing. And I guess this just happened for every era, and we're just noticing it because we have access to media from those eras in a way that we just didn't have before. If I guess when you look at the writing from like the 1860s, I'm like, that's an F? Or is that an S? Like, I literally can't even see what you're talking about here. Yeah. So language is a living entity.
It's the best thing.
Whether it's linguistic or whether it's written, words come in and out of favor, and you can look them up even like on Google. Like they'll show you like which words like crested and fell over time, whether in written documents and whatever. Yeah. But yeah, that it was interesting to look at the 80s and say, I hadn't really paid attention to like the 80s voice, and it's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about hoops yet, but the style of which these games are described to you on TV or on the radio has certainly changed, right? Like the Marv Albert cadence is gone, and now we have JJ Redick is the new one, right? And he does not speak like the marvelous Mike Fratello. Mike Fratello, the czar? Was he the czar? But the language has changed there, and Mike Breen is kind of the last man standing, in my opinion, because you get Iron Eagle, all this stuff. And I think it is the effect of the internet and being able to hear people kind of like, I think someone was saying they were listening to somebody speak, an Australian player, and they're like, oh, he's losing his accent. This makes us sad because he no longer sounds like himself because he's been in America too long. And I think that is a thing that people get really upset about actually in politics, right? Like the homogenization, the singularity, the melting potness of the thing that made you different before. Like, I don't know. It is what actually we get angry about the most.
In politics, it's certainly a touchstone where someone like Hillary Clinton will use a Southern accent and say y'all when she's down south, and then uses her yally intonations when she's doing fundraising dinners on the Upper East Side. And in the same way that newscasters used to always come from Kansas. That was sort of a thing because they had this incredibly vanilla accent that was not placeable as being from New York or being from the South or being from Chicago or being from Boston and a member of the Boston media mafia and someone who voted for certain players to be sixth man of the year. So they went for Kansans. But I don't know that regional accents have the same prominence today. I mean, maybe because of TikTok and stuff, people are able to kind of code switch to like internet host influencer voice when they want to.
I do this myself in my life, and I hate it, but I do it subconsciously. Like, my New Yorkiness comes out in moments that I kind of like wish I could control better. Like the way I'm talking now, as you know, is the way I kind of talk. But sometimes if I'm like shouting over somebody in a Chinese restaurant where there's no lines in Chinatown, I'll be like, yo, let me get one of those things. And I'm like, oh, why did I do that? You know, like I this is not my perfect pod voice. When I'm talking to sports fans, I do that too. You know, when I'm ordering dinner at Mr. Chow, I'm not like, yeah, right, yeah, totally. I don't do that when they're describing a dish. But when someone's talking about sports, I do that. And a part of me thinks that it wants to give a signifier to the other person that, like, I'm with them, I understand them, their language works, let's go. But another part of me thinks I'm a fraud.
When you say boss, you get imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome.
I feel like boss is really a good one to use just as a cultural signifier. Can feel a little bit fraudulent, but you know, it's really the everyday man's like term of endearment. You go into a bodega. You guys are just calling each other boss back and forth.
I love it. I love it. I fucking love it.
What can I do for you, boss? Yell, boss. I'd like an egg and cheese on a roll, boss. Of course, boss. Thank you, boss.
Imagine
Who's in charge here?
Imagine standing out in a drenched field, getting poured on with rain, in your cookies hat, just in misery. You look at your phone. Oh, there's Super Mario Brothers. I'm going to go to a special place for 5 minutes and just see what this movie's about. And he has no Italian accent. What the hell, man? It's like, it's me, Mario. Bullshit.
Let me get a slice of pizza, boss. Was that Mario?
Boss, one slice. It's like, oh, this movie's really gone downhill. It's no Paddington 2, that's for sure. But I do that. It annoys the fuck out of me. I hate it, but you know when it comes out the most, and this is the worst, when the occasional time I get racially slurred, my New Yorkiness goes up so far, man. It's almost as high as Mitchell Robinson. But like, someone will just be like, "Go back to the country," you know, whatever, and I'll be like, "Excuse me."
This fucking guy over here, I'm walking.
This fucking guy, just one slice, man. Fuck out of here. Get fuck out of here. Bing bong, fuck your life. And they're like, apologies, sir. Carry on with your day.
Sorry, I thought you were a Chinese person, not a
There's
member of Bing Bong Nation. Sorry.
It's like, go back to where you came from. And I'll be like,
Bing
don't you
bong.
regret not going to the Knicks? And they're like, respect, sir. Continue with your day. Like a true New Yorker.
I like when I binge like 2 days of The Sopranos and then walk into a place and
Already fun.
ask for a sandwich.
Take me there. Take me there.
You want any fucking mortadella?
Gabagool. It's Hermes.
By the way, they're opening an Hermes store in Williamsburg. I thought you'd be excited to know that.
What street?
I don't know, probably like North 4th or something like that. But, I mean, I think that's great because then I can get Hermes scarves without taking 2 subways.
That's right.
You know, like taking the G and then over to like Manhattan to get all my Hermes. So now I can get Hermes in Williamsburg. So that's great.
I was hoping you were gonna be like, yeah, they turned cookies into a Hermes, or like Club Lux is now an Hermes.
I mean, it's got to be something like that.
I mean,
I don't know. It's
yeah.
the old Vice office. Fuck if I know.
Right. Is there an audience, like people copying delicious slices of pizza in the pizza corridor, being like, "I'll have a slice," and then going to the Hermes store, like fucking Gandolfini?
I always want to grab a new Hermes scarf before I go to Turkey's Nest.
The T Nest. Yo, I had a great time last time we were there, so respect to that damn place.
Yeah, no problem here with the Nest.
The T Nest. Yo, big screens, big sports screens.
The game is on.
Oh, it's on. You get that
T-Nest.
you get that a screen sunburn. It's bright in there.
You know, I switching topics, but not that far. You know, we're talking about
We never do.
no. You know, we're talking about voices. We're talking about this fucking guy, your man, Jack Harlow,
Yes.
who has like a southern
Yes.
accent. I think he's from North Carolina. Recently declared
White man can't jump. He's doing a thing.
that he's the hardest white boy since Eminem. And I remember you saying
Jack Harlow's the
100%
hardest white
true.
boy since Eminem. Yeah.
you've always been saying this. You say this constantly that Jack Harlow is the hardest white boy since Eminem. You're always saying that.
Always saying that. I was just like, I am tired of you guys saying Yellow Wolf is the hardest white boy since Eminem. Yo, LP, our boy, is the hardest white boy since Action Bronson. I'm like, what about Jack Harlow?
Like, what about Jojo Pellegrino?
What about
Or
Ritz?
as he's known, Jojo Pellegrine.
Yeah. I mean, is Post Malone is a rapper, but he's not hard, right? So can we just dispatch with the word hard? We're just talking best rapper, right? Because
Yeah.
Jack Harlow is not hard. He's just a rapper. Like R.A. the Rugged Man probably is harder than Jack Harlow, who's an actor and a white man
Well,
can't jump.
Jack Harlow is definitely not harder than R.A. the Rugged Man, who is an OG.
Right.
But when I'm saying, yeah, he's using hardest as best.
Yep.
He's not saying like I am actually like a tough guy. He is saying I'm good at rapping. No, you've already named people who are better than him. I don't
I mean, he's got
think
logic.
it's a.
He
I
has
mean,
logic.
what about the goat Matt Ox?
Yo, that dancing fiend, man. That video that came out of him in that dancing crew when he was a kid. Matt Ox is a day one.
I think shout out to Droog. He would be on that list.
Great guy.
That Ukrainian lord.
Yeah.
Paul Wall, obviously on that list.
Mac Miller was the one who people were bringing up the most. I was never a Mac Miller fan per se, but he did have a moment. He was on the cover of The Fader.
I have nothing to say about Mac Miller, good or bad. I just didn't listen to his music. I know people who liked him a lot. I know people who thought it was mid. I honestly have like very little opinion on him because I did not listen to his tunes. But he was beloved. Mm-hmm. People really liked him. He was apparently a very good dude, and I know a lot of mutual friends who mourn his death and really fucked with him heavy. I just don't know his music like that. I would say LP, Droog. But is
Wow.
But did LP come out before Eminem? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, Company Flow predated Eminem for sure. Not by much, but for sure.
So
For
he
sure.
he does not count in this conversation. Like
Sorry,
end-to-end burners and all that was before.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to figure out the year that infamous Eminem mixtape was in our grubby mitts, our grubby 90s rap mitts. And that was 96, 97? Was it 97?
Was he beefing with like Cage and Necro and Ill Bill and all those guys too? Man, that was an era.
It certainly wasn't the Little Dicky era. I have not been watching that show, but like, actually, it's not so different. I really enjoyed. So, do you revisit those artists ever?
Not too much. I'm more into white rappers of today, like the Little Mabus or Max the Demon. Local drill faves.
Right.
But you know what? Sorry to just go another direction with this quickly, though. Was that when Eminem rose to prominence and became the most popular rapper and had these enormous records that were much bigger in like the pop world than they were within like the rap world, or like black nightclubs were not playing that many Eminem songs. But he was this huge star. There was this idea that rap was going to become like a white art form in the way that rock and roll had been usurped from its original creators. And I remember that was a real worry that like rap is going to become like what white people do, and black people who came up with this are going to be like pigeonholed and pushed aside. And there was justifiable reason for that suspicion.
Techno. Yeah.
Oh no, there's plenty of examples of it occurring.
Yeah.
But with rap, it's interesting that like we just did not get like the rise of the white rapper as like a huge commercial entity. Like Jack Harlow is probably the most popular one, and he's like sort of popular.
Post Malone, right? Like Post Malone.
Post Malone's a star.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're following the model of like Everlast, like of exiting from rap and becoming
that's fair.
a singer or a country singer or a rock guy, as in Kid Rock also. Within the rap world, white rappers really don't succeed that frequently and with that much like star power.
Is this Macklemore erasure?
But I mean, right? That's a good example. He became a star and then he was gone.
Certainly.
He had some hit records.
Yeah. BC Boys, sadly, death. But like, yeah, that thing you're talking about, I remember it because TRL had kind of consumed the world, the music world, in a way that purists, rightfully, I think, were fearing that like it's going to propel the thing we love into a place that is unrecognizable. And it has happened before in history, and it's happening now. But it didn't. And I would say just within that framing, it was because of the internet, right? It was pre-Dat Piff. It was pre-information. We would tune into TRL to see like Eminem say something, and then he goes at Mark Wahlberg, right? And we're like, damn, that happens like on Twitter, rolling throughout.
He just took down Christopher Reeves.
Yeah, stuff like that, you know? And
Eminem just dissed the Spin Doctors. What the hell?
yeah, I remember Eminem got on TRL and Mark Wahlberg was pushing some movie, and he was just like, yeah, where's your crew? They're a real funky bunch. And it was like, damn. And at the time, it was crazy because Mark Wahlberg did not appreciate that. And that's when his Southie version, I don't know where he's from in Boston, but that's when he got a little roughneck Celtic on air. He transformed a little bit into.
He went out and blinded a Vietnamese man.
Hey, man. Can't we just forgive him? Can't we just let bygones be bygones? The answer is kind of yes, but like
Just a light maiming, but it was a long time ago.
it was crazy, and the guy ends up forgiving him. I don't know. That's a whole different conversation. I am no Mark Wahlberg fan. That is a despicable act. Don't get it. I'm not trying to be difficult about this. That I do not like Mark Wahlberg, but yeah, I don't know. Like he's pretty Eminem, so. What could Eminem say? Like, I'm the hardest white rapper since Mark Wahlberg,
Since MC Search.
right? Since
But
LP.
it does feel right. It does feel like there's always been a sort of ceiling where there's room for like a white rapper or two within the rap industry as far as being like respected, and then they exit to become like more like white stars. And I think that's why Paul Wall still gets a lot of love from people, because Paul Wall didn't switch it up. He didn't say, actually, I'm a country singer now. How funny is that?
But he was also like a really wonderful rap artist, right? Like those were fucking great songs, and that album was so good. I don't know. I'm a big Paul Wall appreciator over here.
Yeah, he was great. I interviewed him a long time ago, and I think it was in LA. I actually didn't meet him in Houston. I think he was recording in Los Angeles. And I don't remember doing anything too eventful with him. You know, we just like hung out a little bit, and maybe we had lunch somewhere. I don't know, it was a long time ago. But he was like extremely nice. And
He's known
like,
to be that, yes.
Yeah, he stayed in touch like texting every now and then. Like, I think he just was like, hey, love the article. But would just like occasionally like text back and forth. Like he was just a really genuinely like humble and nice dude. Mm-hmm. And whether it's some Southern hospitality act, which I do not think it is, he does occupy a different space than some of these other guys we're talking about.
Yeah, and while I like that on a human level, I hate that from my celebrities. I want everyone to be Dylan Brooks. I want everyone to be Jack Harlow, right? But I want the people who interact with me to be as awesome as Paul Wall, for sure, 100%. But like, you talked about something before. It was like the largeness sometimes of these white rappers is, they seem like they're playing a different game. There's a different equation, right? And there was beef for a while about all these diamond records that achieve that status in sales, which is like, I think, License to Ill, Kid Rock. I'm forgetting like some obvious white rappers, but it was not the majority, the popular rap artists that we enjoy. And
right, I mean Limp Bizkit probably,
Eminem, right, and that was. To me, that was not something that was manufactured or kind of debatable in a way. It was like, there's a ton of white rap music fans out there. And however dark that is in terms of American history, artistic history, provenance, the fact is people are buying Eminem records in volumes that are astounding, right?
But I think there's also a truth that even predominantly white audiences don't want to listen to just white rappers.
Agreed.
That they may embrace the occasional white rapper and give them commercial success far beyond what you would expect by their musical output. But overall, they don't want to just listen to a bunch of white rappers over and over and over and over. That's just like not the art form that they're interested in. And Jack Harlow kind of, to me, was always, I don't know, a studied version of Drake in some ways. Mm-hmm. Like he is a very polished rapper. He's got good punchlines. He sounds very comfortable. I remember there was a New Yorker profile on him where his mom was talking about how he put in his like 10,000 hours of work and like this like incredibly
Malcolm
dweebish.
Gladwell-ass rapper.
It really was. It really was. It was so dweeby. But you do hear him, and he's like, he's not very interesting as a rapper, but he is technically sound, and
I have no idea. I can't.
I mean, he just feels like a cohered version of contemporary, like rap music. It's Drake. It's a little sing-songy. He's got some punchlines. Sure. He's generally talking about like stealing your girl. Like he isn't.
Fair enough.
He's not RX Pappy here. Come on.
Is he talking about dealing drugs? Is he
No,
that
no.
street? No.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But anyway, he's also going to be in. This is a basketball segue for that ass. He's also going to be in White Men Can't Jump, which when I watched the trailer, I'm not getting the vibe. I think that movie was a classic because of who was in it, not because it was about a white guy and a black guy and a Latina having, this sort of three-way relationship or that involved gambling on pickup basketball games and hustling. It was about Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes and Rosie Perez being stars.
Yeah, that movie was really well cast, extremely well styled and branded. Like, the movie posters look good, their clothes look awesome. Like, it was just a good movie. They were not really believable ballers, but Woody more than Wesley Snipes, I think. But the basketball movies are really hard to pull off. In general, they're not for me, but I won't be watching this one. But if I really wanted to revisit my youth, as we've been talking, I might check it out.
Yeah, that's a fine approach. But yeah, when I was watching it, I'm like, this just isn't getting what made the original so magical, which was the
Who would
fantastic
you have casted?
Three main actors. But also, as you said, it was era specific. It was California. It was 90s style. It was basketball. It was rap music. It it just there's something about that feels so specific to that time that creating a basketball hustling movie today, I don't know.
What
As
about-
you said, maybe it'll be good. I don't know.
What about cousin Greg as Woody Harrelson? And I'm trying to think of the good Wesley Snipes.
Kevin Hart.
That'd be amazing. He balls a little. I think he's played some rock and jock type things. Who would be the Rosie Perez?
I mean, are we keeping all the racial dynamics the same?
Can
We
we
have to, right? Isn't that the rule?
Yeah, I mean, but we've been comparing Larry Bird to Magic Johnson lately on Twitter, so let it fly.
I mean, I what's her name? Caballos. Why don't we throw her in the mix? She's a star.
Caballos, I'm not sure who that is, but sounds good.
Isn't that her name? I don't know, man. I'm just trying to. Camila Cabello. That's something. Or Cabello, however you say it.
Yeah, the singer, that works.
Yeah, let's throw her in the mix. Or Rosalia. There we go. Although she's a Spaniard.
What about the actor from Stranger Things that just got married at the age of 21, which is a totally normal, or 20, totally normal age to get married, but we're not happy about that on Twitter.
I don't know who you're talking about. I'm furious.
I forgot her name, but
I'm irate.
I don't watch Stranger Things. It's for children, unless I watch
Same.
Stranger Things. Then I'll come up for an excuse.
Yeah, it's a baby show.
Yo, speaking of rappers and basketball, segueing into basketball, you know the many Bing Bong chats I'm on?
How many?
3. I've started to ignore. I've been ignoring them since the All-Star break. But, sometimes I'll check in to see. I don't participate. I don't post, but I'll read some of it. Chuck D joined one of mine.
Ooh, that's star-studded.
That is. Respect to Chuck D, who had a moment downtown where he was mixing it up with Gang Gang Dance for a second. He was hanging out with Lizzie Bergastos, our good friend. He was around, right? I mean, Flavor Flav is a fan of the joy of basketball, as everyone knows on our IG feed. But he joined the chat, and he's not really been giving nuggets, but he was participating last time I checked, which... I don't know. These phones are crazy things, man.
What's a Chuck D take? You don't have to reveal exactly what he's saying or read it off. No reason to blow up the group chat. But I'm just curious. What's the variety? Is Knicks need to hit the boards harder?
Yeah. It's not like RJ Barrett should not go at 4 defenders at the same time, or RJ Barrett should probably retire, or RJ Barrett should be a country singer. None of this stuff. It's just basically they had heart tonight.
I wish she was saying stuff just like RJ Barrett is bringing the noise.
Yeah.
The Knicks could use some black steel in the hour of chaos.
Yeah, if they were playing Tariq Black from back in the day, the fear of a black planet.
That would be amazing. I would love Chuck D in the group chat.
I don't know. I these group chats are not for me, not because these people aren't great, smart fans. It's because you cannot get any discussion done when there's 40 people chiming in. It is just a mess. When they would have those versus battles and you try to get a joke off and it would get buried under 50 texts in 1 second.
Oh yeah, well that happens. And I mean, anyway, let's talk about last game. We can get into how Jalen Brunson was driving into a nation of millions if we want. Yeah. So we'll talk Knicks Heat first, and that was you had talked about this on Twitter a little bit, that yesterday felt a bit like a holiday. Now it was a gloomy holiday as it turned out, but it did feel like a holiday where everyone was watching the game. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Knicks games, might as well shut down business. The Knicks game are on, and then it did not turn out that well. They had I want to say a 6-point halftime lead.
It felt like it
could have been 15.
They got spode.
And they got spode. The wheels fell off and they ended up losing in a game that wasn't really that tight down the very stretch. It felt like the way that they had beaten Cleveland. They were just a little outmatched, a little outmaneuvered, and they couldn't quite get over the hump to make it a competitive game, even if it was only a couple possessions.
And ironically, the game turns when a certain stretch big starts chucking deep passes and stretching and hitting bombs and just like doing small stuff that frustrates the Knicks. And I'm of course talking about Kevin Love, a player the Cavaliers let go for nothing.
It was funny because the Cavs' inability to spread out the floor, their lack of like overall playmaking, basketball IQ, and then you see Kevin Love just doing those things.
I know.
Like that's literally what he can do. He can shoot threes, he can make outlet passes, and just do smart old man basketball routine moves.
Yep. Good. He's a very good player, man. I'm a fan of Kevin Love, the original.
I can't wait
white
to
rapper.
introduce him to the pickup run. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, doesn't he live in Tribeca? I've seen AD. I've seen his Beach Boys ass house with good art in it. He has good art in his house. Rashid Johnson.
He definitely lives in Tribeca for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so here's my quick take on the Knicks. Was that the Knicks, I guess they've often felt like a very deep team this year, that they had their guys, but there was a depth of two-way players that they just kept kind of running out there. And they could play whoever was doing a good job. They could sit who wasn't, but they had a real reservoir of guys who were good on both sides of the ball. And I think with Randall out and with Grimes limited in minutes, they felt thinner.
And IQ
yesterday.
kind of having on and off troubles.
Yeah, and again, IQ has not been his electrifying self that he was through much of the season, which is, I think, tamped down any complaints about him not winning Sixth Man of the Year. Like, let's just let that one slide.
It
He
shouldn't
probably
matter,
should have
but
won
it does.
But it's hard to argue about it when he's out there doing virtually nothing in the playoffs so far. But the Knicks did not have that feeling of a team that could send waves of good players at you yesterday.
I mean, when you're up against a team in the second round, that starts devaluing itself, right? Because the 6-man, 7-man rotation kind of gets tighter, and you go with your guys. And I think the weakness of the Knicks is one of their guys is, as we've always talked about, R.J. Barrett. He had he shot 50% from the field, I believe, but he let 4 or 5 possessions kind of slip through his hands in the fourth, and that's when the game turned, when he was just like fumbling the ball, throwing the ball out of bounds. It happens to R.J., whatever. It is clearly a situation where Julius Randle's absence was felt, because the depth is great, but as soon as you're missing your best player, your second best player, you have no more depth. It's it. It's not like Grimes getting hurt is going to change the team as much as their best player. And the reason why Randle is their best player is, as we all know and people want to ignore, is like his ball control is helpful in a Tibbs style point of view. The way he can control a possession, the way he eats the ball, the way his size plays into the offensive scheme. He is a very, very good player who has some very emotional, strange moments, which I fucking love. I really like him. But his absence, his size, his ball control, and his stretchability, that little bit of stretchability, was the difference in this game.
What's pretty shocking thus far in the playoffs is the Knicks are currently 4-2, in their 6 games, and they're shooting under 27% from three for the entire playoffs.
This is their whole story. Yeah.
But what's kind of crazy about that stat is that if one didn't pay attention to the Knicks this year and just started tuning in for the playoffs, you might think of them as a traditional Knicks team that offensively challenged, they play defense, they crash the boards, they block a few shots, they get to the foul line, they're a gritty team. They aren't really. like they are an awesome offensive rebounding team, but that's because of Mitchell Robinson and Hart is good at that too. They aren't a good defensive team, and they haven't been all year. What they are is an elite offensive team. Mm-hmm. And they get to the line, they get second chance opportunities, and they take a lot of threes. They're within, the top 10 in terms of three-point rate, and they shoot okay from three, mediocre. So when you look at them and you say, well, right now, the Knicks are taking the second fewest threes per game after the Phoenix Suns, who don't believe that the three-point line exists. The Knicks are taking 30 a game, which is second lowest in the league, and they're shooting 27% from three. It's really putting them behind an offensive 8-ball. And I thought a problem last game, even though they still took 34 threes, was that after they were missing them, they just stopped taking them. They went to mid-range. They went to, attacking the paint, running into crowds, nations of millions. They stopped taking threes after they didn't fall, and I felt like that was a mistake. They need to keep taking threes or they will not win.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, styles make fights, right? And the playoffs are tough because that's one game against there's no identity talk here because it's tough to look at playoff stats because you're playing one team, then two teams, and other teams have stopped playing. And in the regular season, the Knicks, I don't know, they were 8th in 3 points attempted. And their whole story is they're not good at shooting, but they shoot enough to get by. And their guys kind of make it work. They're an offensive team and not a defensive team. But it's confusing because in acquiring Josh Hart, it completely changes the persona of what they're trying to do. They become more of a traditional Tibbs team, I think. But the story with the Knicks is they're neither here nor there. They were right in the middle of 3-point percentage. They're mid. They're extremely middle of everything. But I think the joys of watching Tibbs coach this year is he would press the right button sometimes. Benching the players when he did and playing the players when he did was it was a good job. But he got spoed, and when you don't have your best player, you have no chance. The Knicks had a mountain to climb last night.
Yeah, and there was a few plays that could have gone another direction. I know some Knicks fans were grousing about the reffing, but I just thought there was a few pivotal plays that if the Knicks had been smarter with the ball, had held on to a pass instead of fumbling it, or just knocked down an open shot, and maybe the result's different. Yeah. There were some different plays that really did sculpt the ending of that game. But again, the one point I was going to make about 3-point shooting is Jalen Brunson postseason, 24%, Hart 33%, Barrett 24%, Randall 24%, Quickly 28%, Toppin 36%, Grimes 17%. That's just not going to score you enough points. So
they were number 19 in 3-point percentage.
But that's fine.
Season.
That's fine.
It's fine. That's not what kills them. I mean, I think what killed them last night, they had a really good season. The thing that killed them last night was ball control. Jalen Brunson obviously is good at that. But when they swarm him in a box and one, when they just double, triple team him, and he's small, Randall can kind of handle some of those possessions usually. He's a bit of a playmaker as a big. He's not exceptional, but he can do it. Right? He can hold the ball in the post. You're not going to slap the ball out of his hands. The hands don't bother him like they bother Brunson. And not having that option in setting up a play was the small difference of the game. The Knicks, it was a coin flip until RJ was like, I am the Maple Mamba. I am him. Jimmy twisted his ankle. I am the new him. He was certainly a version of him, depending on how you define that.
Yeah, I thought there was a dovetailing of two issues that worked against the Knicks. And one is that when you play Miami, there's an acclimation period to get used to how handsy Jimmy Butler and Lowry are. And the team overall, but especially those two guys. They are always trying to figure out a way to slap at the ball, sneak up on you and knock it away in ways that most guys don't do.
Mitch was
You know,
frustrated, man.
they are really cagey. They're super crafty. They're veterans, and they've been doing this for a long time. But like, it's a real thing, and you could tell that the Knicks weren't used to that because the Cavs don't do it the same way. They aren't almost this like weird veteran, like almost pickup ball style of trying to like sneak a steal every now and then. Like, oh, you got the rebound? You know what? I'm gonna try to knock it out of your hands. Cavs don't do that. Young guys don't do that. It's like there's a savviness, especially to obviously Lowry and Butler, who are probably basketball geniuses in this way too. Just finding those little edges, and I think the Knicks were unprepared. But also that combined with the fact that other than Brunson, they don't have another guy who can reliably have the ball in his hands, you know, besides Randall, and Randall was out. So there was a lot of times when you'd see Hart trying to make a play as a ball handler and bungling it, because that's not what he is. He is a 3-and-D guy who can attack a closeout. He's strong. He's a good rebounder. He's not a guy who can dribble and think at the same time. He just can't do that. It's never been part of his game. Impossible for him. And we've seen this happen a few times as really the only thing that Hart has struggled at. He's been wonderful for the Knicks.
It's not his job. He's a chaos player.
That's what I mean. And he causes chaos with the ball in his hands because he can't actually see the floor and dribble and be defended. And Miami's doing that. They're running over there, trying to strip the ball from him. They're hassling him. And the same thing with RJ. You know, there was a couple plays when you just knew the result before the play happened. Yeah. There was one where Hart was like on the lead ball handler on a 2-on-1, 3-on-1 break going at Lowry. And you're like, nope. And Lowry stripped it off his leg, going the other direction. Like it was doomed. You just saw it happening, and there was no way that Hart was going to figure that out. And then there was a couple late plays where, you know, they switched Lowry, I think, onto RJ and took Jimmy off of him, despite the fact that Jimmy was hobbling. And I'm like, that's stupid. And then Lowry like slapped the ball off of RJ or stripped it or something like that. Like, Miami is, they are very crafty, and the Knicks need to be more disciplined about getting the ball in the hands of Brunson and IQ, or even the other guard who never plays. He played a couple minutes.
Deuce
young
McBride.
guy. McBride, yeah. They can't have Hart and RJ running around as decision makers against a team like Miami.
And I'm glad we got through the basketball part of it, because we're burying the lead a little bit. This is a culture war, damn it. This is Miami versus New York City, right? And like, we had a few buddies at the game yesterday texting, and it was about the energy, it was about culture. It's like, and Heat fans at that being like, ooh, Knicks fans don't have that Heat culture in their DNA. And there's a lot of talk about the 90s, a lot of talk about Charles Oakley versus Alonzo Mourning, Jeff Van Gundy as an accessory to Alonzo Mourning's ankle, Charlie Ward being flipped over by P.J. Brown. It was all over the broadcast. You know, it's a shame that Jeff Van Gundy isn't calling the game. I think they really miss an opportunity to have that team calling the Knicks Heat. But it might be a conflict of interest with Mike Breen. I don't know. But 3 Knicks guys, yeah, you can't do that. But it was, I think, a wasted opportunity to talk about what we were seeing, because it was so long ago when that PJ Brown, Charlie Ward stuff happened. It's like a lifetime ago. People don't care. Things ended, in my opinion, when Alonzo Mourning got sick. And I was like, oh, fuck this. His best friend is Patrick Ewing. Like, there is no beef here. I love Miami. I go to Miami as much as I can. Like, I kind of like Jamal Mashburn. I've always liked Jamal Mashburn. Like, what are we doing here? It was kind of like one of those moments. And I want to get into Giannis later, but like, watching the teams match up yesterday, I was trying to find some sort of juice, and I'm like, I love Jimmy Butler, man. When he went down with that injury, I was like, that sucks. Get up, Jimmy. Like, come on, man. We need 2 more months of you. I've already, like, I want the Knicks to win. But if the Heat are better, like, I do not mind the Heat moving on, you know?
I feel that. But let's talk about Giannis, because
okay,
those quotes happened a few days ago, but they were since we recorded our last Perfect Pod, so we might as well chat about them a little bit. At this point, I don't know that I need to say them again. I think most people who are listening to this pod have a decent idea what I'm talking about. But just for a quick refresh, the Bucks were stunned in the first round. They lost to these same Miami Heat who bedeviled the Knicks yesterday. They lost to them 4-1, which was
really close Game 5. Very close Game 5.
Oh, there were very close games, but it was a decisive loss for the Bucks in terms of being 4-1, a gentleman's sweep against a team that almost didn't make the postseason. And the Bucks, of course, were the number 1 seed with the best record in basketball. So when Giannis was asked about whether the season was a failure, he bristled a little bit, and he said to the beat reporter from The Athletic, "Do you get a promotion every year in your job? No, right? So every year you work is a failure. Yes or no? No. Every year you work towards something, towards a goal, which is to get a promotion, to be able to take care of your family, provide a house for them, or take care of your parents. You work towards a goal. It's not a failure. It's steps to success." And that caused a lot of conversations on Twitter. And I've seen you tweeting about it. I don't think we've discussed it at all. You seem to be saying he's right. Am I misinterpreting what you said about it?
He's being Pollyannic about it. He's doing a thing that's like, but we're having warm food, and isn't it wonderful? It's not the best bucatini we've ever had, but it's warm and we're together. He's doing that thing. My stance is he's 100% correct if that's how he feels. And we're not able to project our religion onto someone else and have them believe it. So if you think it is an objective failure that he lost 4-1 and he doesn't feel it, good luck with convincing him that it is a failure, right? And we wrote about this in our book, like, what is a bust? Is Kwame Brown a bust? Is there a nuance here that kind of dissolves that binary thought? And I think that's what Giannis is trying to say. And he's doing a thing. I know he's doing an annoying thing, but that annoying thing is a bit of a checkmate because he's like, I'm a champion. You know my resume. I am extremely frustrated. But remember Yao Ming? He was like, I'm eating fried chicken, drinking beer. What did you expect? A funeral?
Yeah, I think on one hand, I get why Giannis would internalize that question as being about him. Mm-hmm. Do you think this season is a failure? Like, do you think you're a failure this year? Were you a failure? Right? I get why he's internalizing it because he is the face of the franchise. He is the Milwaukee Bucks. This is, of course, a really fair question to say, you worked all year.
Honestly.
Right. I'm saying, was the writer saying, like, Giannis, do you feel like you were a failure? I don't think that's what the writer was.
The answer no was unacceptable. The answer had to have been yes, right?
Well, that's what I mean, right? He's like, well, there was a really easy cliche, like, well, of course, this season was a disappointment. We wanted to go further in the playoffs for our fans, and we're going to get out there in the summer. We're going to lift a lot of weights, and
if you see these straps on my boots, we're going to pull them up.
This kind of brings me up to some thoughts about the Bucks overall. Is like there's an inclination, I think, by fans, by sports media, probably by organizations and everyone in the game, to view playoff success or failure as the revelation of a team's true soul, their character, and to see the Bucks go out and lose in 5 games, I feel like there's a compulsion to say they've been exposed. This team is a fraud. They are not contenders. And I'm not saying they are or aren't, but I feel like it's the same way that when they won 2 years ago, we were like, the hearts of champions. These guys, I'm like, it's the same people. Same core, same coach, same franchise. Are they either like winning culture, doing it the right way, or are they like a flop who needs to be disbanded with a new coach? Like, which are they? Or could it be that, look, Miami's pretty good. Giannis missed 3 games. Jimmy Butler got really hot. And then we blew 2 late leads, and Miami shot really well from the floor.
Yeah.
And you know what? Those things came together, and we ate that L. So on one hand, I think Giannis could have been a little more regular about that answer.
He's never regular, though. We know this, right? He's never normal.
I didn't mind his response, but it felt like you're comparing yourself to a guy from The Athletic who probably makes like $35K.
Let's stop talking about money, though. The economics is market.
I know, I know, but it's like when he's like, you're looking for a promotion. If you don't get the promotion, but going to the playoffs isn't a promotion. This is a false equivalency. But again, the major point that he's making is a crowd pleaser.
It is not. People were 90% furious at him.
I don't know. A lot of people loved it too. Maybe it was divisive. I don't know.
I
saw a lot of people saying, "Dude, just be like, yo, we lost." Like, yeah, that sucked. Move on.
But okay,
I don't know.
a couple things, right? Like maybe one thing. I got into a really smart friend of ours, a debate with one of our friends, and they made a really good point. And they were like, if we cannot call someone who loses a game the loser of the game, then what the hell are we doing watching this? And I'm like, whatever we want to do. And I'm steadfast in this. I'm like, and yet we still watch it, you know? And what Giannis is doing is super annoying, but he's a super annoying person. And a detail to remember, I think, and I know I get caught up in this, is we find out that Coach Bud's brother dies in a car accident before Game 4. And all Game 5, we're like, what is Coach Bud doing? He's got 2 timeouts. Is he not trying to put Brook Lopez back in the game? He is behaving not like a championship-winning coach. We find out. We cannot explain how he's thinking. We cannot get in his head. But we find out he has experienced a traumatic thing before Game 4 when he kind of like loses his focus, as we can observe, right? And then everything happens, and Giannis is talking about a really human feeling that he has, being like, I have pride. The same things that you told me made me great is the same things I am Jack Harlow. I am the hardest player alive since Eminem, right? And I love that. And the debate on Twitter, to me, came down to the idea, and I had said this, I think, on Twitter, is like, the media is a part of it, but I don't see the media as a judge and jury. I see them more as like prosecutors. Storytellers is a cringe word, but they are prosecutors or defense attorneys. They're trying to convince you of their point of view. We are the judge and jury of that. So when Kendrick Perkins is just like, you guys are ridiculous. A loss is a loss is a loss. And we're just like, we don't feel that. And that's what Giannis is trying to say. Like, I'm not feeling what you're feeling. And end of story, right? It's a kind of a dead end. It's a hung jury.
Yeah, I also think Giannis was intentionally asking a question that wasn't asked because it was.
He's not good at this. I mean,
no, yeah. But I think he was good at this in some ways. But he wasn't asked. He was answering the question the way that he was answering a question that he wanted to answer. He wasn't answering the actual question. Like, he was evading the real question and making it like this larger ideological thing, which also is what we do on this pod all the time. So
I love that stuff. I love
no qualms about that. But I mean, he knew what he was doing. He knew he wasn't answering what that beat writer was asking him.
But he was doing a better thing, right? Because that beat writer's question wasn't good, but he gave an amazing response. Thoughtful, right?
I agree with. Well, it was far more interesting than just saying, yeah, that sucked. We'll be back next year, fans. It was way more interesting, and it sparked far more conversation. So I'm 100% on that. Let's talk a little bit about Steph Curry. He drops 50 yesterday in Game 7 against the Sacramento Kings, a worthy adversary who just could not oust the former champs.
Ran out of talent. Harrison Barnes had a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, they had their chances in that series. That was a competitive, tight series in a lot of the games,
Mooney, man.
especially early on.
Yeah,
but Golden State wanted it more, as we heard yesterday. Over and over. They wanted it more. Why? Because Kevon Looney wants it more than anyone.
He played good, though. He played really well against the better
he was awesome.
player, right?
He was awesome.
Sabonis is better, but he played.
Well, Sabonis is better at a lot of things. Kevon Looney is a better rebounder. That's for sure.
I mean, Sabonis is no slouch, but yes, Looney is a better rebounder.
He's a beast. He's Paul Reed-esque on the boards. But, I want to talk about Curry a little bit because you claim that I hate Steph Curry. You've made this claim.
I still will make it. Let's go.
Well, the last time we talked at length about Steph was probably 3 seasons ago, I want to say.
Well, no, it was before the finals last year against the Celtics.
Well, maybe. Anyway. Something like
Less than a year ago.
I don't know if we talked about him that much then. Maybe we did.
Oh, we did. You hated. You thought they were frauds going into the playoffs.
Well, they are frauds, but
okay, but they won the championship.
Fraudulent
championship.
That was a bullshit championship. Totally. But let me just say this about Steph. When I am skeptical of his place, and this was a conversation though from a couple years ago, not from last year. When I've been skeptical of his place on the all-time hierarchy of players, it was because I feel like he and Golden State often sort of took the easy route. And in Steph's case, part of this is them being rich kids from basketball families. Part of it is the aura of Golden State, this Palo Alto disruptor, billionaire.
Light years ahead.
Like there's just a lot of whackness that is tied to that team that doesn't necessarily or doesn't have anything to do with what happens on the court itself, right? Mm-hmm. The basketball was generally beautiful. Yeah. He is incredible, but there were things that were attached to Golden State that I didn't like, and those things, in my opinion, did sometimes juxtapose with, to me, a team and a player who didn't quite have like the wars that we imagine teams should have. They were a superpower, a dynastic team that didn't really go through like the Lakers with Shaq and Kobe or Pau. The Spurs, they didn't really go through Lob City until Lob City was kind of crumbling.
LeBron?
No, they sort of, but not really. That was my thing. Like they didn't have this rise, and that was that was typical of how we see empires rise and fall in the NBA, or what we believe is this Jordan originalism idea of like.
Who did the Bulls go through?
Exactly. But that exact story, right? Yeah. They didn't have that, and Curry, as Gilbert Arenas pointed out, up until age 25 was just kind of a guy. He played a few more years of college than other guys.
The Mark Jackson years were not extraordinary.
He was injured a lot. He was coming back from terrible ankle problems. Yeah. But he didn't really emerge as a superstar until his mid-20s. And then they went and they won a couple chips. Oh, I'm sorry, they won one chip. Then they added KD, which kind of took him out of the role of being like the true alpha on that squad. Mm-hmm. And then he was hurt. And they tanked. And that was when we had long conversations about Steph. And my point about him was that he hadn't really just carried the burden in a somewhat like thankless way for teams that weren't stacked. And I looked at guys like Harden or Iverson, guys who did that for a long time. And I'm saying now that I think Steph has done that now. That was what I was always holding against him, was that I felt like he had just kind of chilled. He won 2 MVPs. He was a scoring champion. They added supreme talent and sort of non-competitively won a couple titles, and then he chilled out. But in the last couple of years, he has done exactly what I thought he needed to do. And I'm not saying I am the
he understands
arbiter
the assignment
of this here. Yeah. Thank you, Steph, for
you listened to me.
I'm saying exactly that. But he did it. He did it. He went and he won the scoring title in a year where the Warriors weren't really going anywhere. They kind of snatched a title out of the blue last season, and now they're back in it again, and he's dropping 50 in a game 7. All I got to say is, like, if people want to put him like top 5, top 7, go for it. He has knocked those parts of the resume out that I thought were lacking in like incredibly impressive fashion.
Yeah, and to address the first part of his career that you were describing well, it was like the reason I loved him so much, even in the KD era. KD, as you know, I have in the highest tier of the NBA history. But Steph was so strange, right? Because sure, like he kind of deferred to Kevin Durant, in my opinion, the better player, the more complete player, the more dangerous player on the court. But is he? Like, this is where no one likes to talk about metrics, so let's just talk about looking at the games. Gravity. The idea of gravity. They had to start talking about this thing that Steph Curry was doing that we had never seen before. And it doesn't really, like, he doesn't carry the team with gravity. But he changes the whole idea of the NBA. And he does not get all the MVP finals accolades that Michael Jordan did, or Kobe Bryant, or an Alpha, or Shaq. But he had introduced these ideas and become such a strange new thing that we kind of were running out of language to talk about it, and that we had to invent new terms. There's a greatness in there that I love that isn't necessarily rankable, but it is. We always talk about like modernism and cubism and all these weird things that, like, is it good? I was like, well, it certainly changed everything. Is there a goodness in that? Debatable. I think he's been doing it for so long, and this is where longevity comes in, that last night he dropped 50, and it's just like, what else do you want this guy to do? He's Mike Tyson, who never fought a good fighter. Floyd Mayweather never fought a great fighter. Pacquiao was already washed, right? So do you take these wins away from them? In boxing, you dodge your opponents. That is a business decision. In Curry's example, he just beat most of the players that he was confronted with, and that's all he can kind of do.
Well, my thing is that I don't even think you have to go out there and say he needed more championships. Like, I'm not even, like I don't have that rigidity towards like titles,
Giannis
because there are a lot of
yeah.
There's a lot of circumstances in it. But when we had this talk last time, we talked a lot about Curry and his legacy and where he ranked all time and a lot of stuff like that. And this was early. This was in 2020, early in the 2021 season. And up until that point, as I just said, he was a 6-time All-Star who had won one title without KD. Like, that doesn't change him being the greatest shooter in history or an all-time great. But there is this sort of there's this challenge of assigning people, all-time positions based on, is it their peak? Is it a small peak? Or is it them being incredible for a long period of time? Like,
Larry Bird had a short career, right?
Relatively so, for sure. And it's like, but where does that stop? Do we say, well, T-Mac is a top 10 player of all time because he was, in terms of just talent, he was insane. But he
I love him.
Didn't have a long duration of being exceptional because of injuries. And, when I look at Steph, again, as I'm pointing out, that was before the last 3 years in which he won a scoring title, won a title as won 3 All-Stars, and may well win a title this year. And, put up 29 this season despite some injuries. And to me, that was what fleshed out his resume that made him, like, not only the greatest shooter of all time and one of the, top 3 offensive weapons to ever walk the planet, but put him in that category of guys who just did it for a long time.
And I thought it was really a nice or an interesting story within that series, him going against Kevin Huerter, who is not asked to do the stuff Curry is, but was the guy to handle the spacing for the Kings. And he flamed out in a solid way. They shut him down. He could not get it
Respect to
going.
Albany. Respect to
Are you claiming all of? Are you claiming
Respect to Red Velvet.
Yeah. Oh,
But
okay, yes.
I'm
Respect
saying
to all.
he
Of it.
didn't.
Yes, yes.
He did not shoot well.
And what Steph Curry did, we always talk about influence with artists, musicians, filmmakers, right? Does influence come into greatness? Thankfully, an artist like Wes Anderson is not that influential. I would say he's a standalone. Turns out Curry, thankfully, Love Rushmore. sorry about that. When it comes to Curry, it turns out he's not that influential either. Teams try to do what he does, but he turns out to be more of a one of one than we thought originally. We're like, oh, it's volume. He switches coaches from Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr. They abandon the high pick and roll. Steve Kerr tells him to light that fucking scoreboard up, and that's what he does. And now we expect every coach to identify a shooter to do the same thing. It has not happened successfully. Curry's the only one. I mean, there's scoring inflation, but that's complicated. That's not just 3-point attempts. And I don't know. Your hatred towards him is, I know you don't hate him, but
No. I think he's incredible. And my point that has gotten me a lot of hatred from foolish masses was what you just said. And, we talked about it in the book too, is that I don't think Steph is that influential in terms of the rise of the 3-pointer league wide. I think he is influential in terms of people shooting from deep, people shooting off the dribble, for sure. Stylistically and like the way that threes are taken, I think he has been obviously like inspirational. But threes were coming anyway. The math is the math.
Yeah.
He may have validated the 3-pointer to guys like Charles Barkley by winning a title. But I think he is so singularly great at shooting that it's not replicable.
Trae Young can't do it. Like,
no one can. No one can.
Like, he's the one.
All the guys who are supposed to do it can't do it.
Yeah.
Like Lillard is a great 3-point shooter. He shoots from deep. He can't do it.
Nope.
No one can. It's just Steph. And like, if you look at LeBron, it's true that there are guys who like can do some of the stuff like LeBron, but there aren't other LeBrons. But it is easier to see like Harden, Jokic, Doncic, even Trae Young as like versions of the LeBron distributor, facilitator role, because that's like an idea. What Steph does isn't really an idea. It's doing the thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like you can replicate someone playing like LeBron James. They can't be as great as him, but they can be a tall facilitator who scores and sprays balls to 3-point shooters all over the place. But you can't just say, me laughing,
the language.
Sprays balls.
I love it.
As I said it, it sounded funny.
I love it. I love it.
As I said it, I was like, am I going to get away with this?
I'm into it, man. It's officially a perfect pod now.
Yeah, we did it. So you're spraying the balls.
Yeah.
And, but point being, Curry's greatness is not in the model of player he is. Mm-hmm. It's in his ability to just do supernatural shit.
Yeah. Your point is taken, and your point is good. I'm into this. Like, we should not just let him waltz into the top 5. I'm a fan of Charles Barkley's worldview, and his campaign against Steph is awesome. We need this, right? And it bleeds into metrics versus eyes, and math versus feelings, and all this stuff. And there was a bit of hubris in people who love Steph being like, he's one of the greatest ever. He's the top tier historical star, assuming that he would continue this greatness. And sometimes it flames out on players, but other times it does not, and it comes true. And you kind of hedge that a little bit. And there was some hedging by Steph Nation, but it has come true. And there was some debate last night, and I don't know where you stand on this, Magic Johnson versus Steph. And I was like, even without parsing eras and the nuances of that, like Steph is the better point guard in my opinion.
I mean, I don't know if you know why you're comparing a power forward to a point guard.
True story. But who was the Lakers point guard during Showtime? Was that Byron Scott? Was a 2? Well, he was just a shooter. He didn't handle. He's a point guard.
I mean, Magic was the ball handler. He's also
Very tall.
not really a. I mean, he's played the same position as LeBron. Is LeBron a point guard? I don't know.
LeBron was, right? Like, he started in the league as a point. LeBron has played every position.
But speaking of LeBron, so we have him versus Steph, maybe for the last time with, stakes on the line. You never know who's going to get hurt, who will be around. Both these guys are older. LeBron obviously does not have a lot of seasons left, although it's remarkable how long he keeps sticking around. But this may be the last time we see Steph versus LeBron, Draymond in the mix, Anthony Davis.
Excellent versions
Klay
of
Thompson.
them. Right. They're
Klay
still here.
There are interesting role players in this. There are secondary actors, but this is a nice kind of culmination of what's been a fun rivalry over the last decade. And on one hand, I'd like seeing the changing of the guard. I would have liked to see Sacramento against Memphis to a degree. Okay, these are the new guys up. This is who the future of the league is. But when I was thinking about it, future is inevitable. Like, we're going to have a changing of the guard.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
If we don't need it to happen already. Yeah. It'll happen when it happens. And thinking about seeing LeBron, who is still formidable, and Curry, who is doing the stuff that we saw yesterday, I was like, yeah, let's let the old dogs bark it up for another series. Like, let's go. I'm into this series.
I mean, it helps that these old dogs are thrilling players. Like, I love Anthony Davis. I think he's awesome. I really love it when he's healthy and doing AD type things, but he's not thrilling. LeBron James and Steph Curry, that's who I care about. Like, those guys are wildly fun to watch, and them kind of still being excellent, to your point. Like, yeah, I'm really excited for this. I'm not into the Grizzlies as much as I want to be. I don't love John Moran as I hoped I would. I like him. I like his antics off the court. I like his personality. I like when he beats up kids. No.
I like Kyrie's politics.
No, but I like when Ja's just like, I'm not scared of LeBron. Like, I love that stuff,
Yeah, I mean, the Grizzlies got justifiably roasted, but that's how it works.
Yes,
exactly. You talk shit and you come up short, you get roasted. Like, it is, I don't see there being anything objectionable about what they did or how they've been treated since losing.
Yeah.
They did not put together a great effort in Game 6. They went out and got absolutely smoked. But I also don't think they were that good of a team without Steven Adams or Brandon Clark. Like, they just didn't have the ability to defend or crash the boards that they had for most of the season.
Yeah.
Their loss to me was not ununderstandable or even an indictment of them as a team. They were really good for a lot of the year, and then they had some injuries. They obviously made some moves last offseason that maybe they could have used Anderson or Melton this year, but I don't know. I don't think they have anything to be embarrassed about. No. Talk your shit, lose, accept it. I think Ja saying I said what I said was cooler than Dylan Brooks being like, fearful of talking to the media repeatedly. Like, dude, be one or the other. Be a badass or don't.
Man, I was thinking about statistics and metrics for analysts, for broadcasters, and shit talkers. And we have a shit talking chapter or entry in our book. And, like, respect to Draymond Green, who was so good at this. Even in defeat, he's just like, nah, I'm going to keep on talking my shit. And he keeps it going, and he knows who his teammates are, and he has a good chance of ending out on the good side, his own side of it. But Dylan Brooks kind of runs out of talent off the court, right? We need, I need the Dylan Brookses of the NBA. I really enjoy it. It kind of, they either annoy me or delight me, but I like those feelings, either or of those. And there's talk of the unrestricted free agent Dylan Brooks of being out of the NBA. He was exposed as a bad player. I'm like, I desperately want the Grizzlies to keep him. I want them to bring back this whole team. To your exact point, like maybe they get another big for some depth if Adams and Clark go down. Clark is a really good player. That sucks that he couldn't stay healthy. Random injury. But I didn't appreciate the style of play when Ja was just flying around everywhere, kind of like in defeat. He just like kind of gave up and started jumping around, and it was not fun to watch them go down. But I do hope the NBA and that team values what Dylan Brooks brings off the court. Maybe he gets better at the shit talking.
I mean, I think Brooks is a good defender.
It's fine.
He obviously struggles to shoot. Him as a character, with his vests and outfits, is amusing to me. I can't say I'm a fan of him, but he also won me over by being so obnoxious.
Right.
He just relentlessly, diligently stuck to being annoying in a way that I can only respect.
I mean, Ja kind of fueled that fire, right? Like he put oxygen into it. Ja, that dance in the hallway before the games, like that is a Ja idea. I don't know. I like the villainy of this team. I just wish they were like better. I don't know. I think they're missing Melton and Slow-Mo.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I looked at a few of the. They just felt flimsy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I agree.
Against the Lakers, and the Lakers just like there was one play where Dylan Brooks drove and just got his shit just punched by AD, and he kind of turned towards the court, and AD was standing there like LeBron stepped up, and there was just this wall of LeBron and AD, and I felt bad for Dylan Brooks. Like,
yes, I agree.
You just got your shot packed, and you turn, you're like, here's like LeBron and AD like staring you down. He had to like kind of like turn, like half smile and walk away.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The Lakers are no joke, man. Like they were a good team.
Hillbilly Kobe.
As much as we roasted Pelinka for making poor roster decisions, they kind of pulled a rabbit out of the hat late in the season. I always kind of like D'Lo, even if he's not that good. But having Reeves as a contributor, going and getting Vanderbilt, who's just like a defensive guy who runs around there and gets some boards, adding a little bit of shooting. With AD and LeBron healthy, you don't need that much.
Yo, and everyone knew this about AD and LeBron and Pelinka's point of view. When you make bad moves, we're gonna roast you as a community. When you make good moves, we're gonna be like, that was a good move. And when they made that deal to get D'Lo and Vanderbilt, I think most people in real time were like, that's an excellent trade. Like, ooh, scary now. Like, Russ didn't quite fit as a piece in that offense, and you put D'Lo in and Vanderbilt for depth, and you kind of like let Reeves do Reeves things now. Good. Yeah, like criticism is what it is. It's like it's based off of the present, and a lot of it is. Pelinka did a good job, and he got lucky, right? Like every time AD goes to the ground, I'm like, did Pelinka do a good job or bad job? Let's see if he gets up.
Right. Yeah. The funny thing is, I don't think anyone thinks Pelinka's done a good job, but they might end up with, I don't know, 2 championships in 4 years. Like it's like, and by any metric, that would be like enormously successful.
I mean,
like, wow, this is a genius.
We're doing the Giannis thing though because sorry to talk over you, but we're doing the Giannis thing because a few minutes ago you just said, well, the Warriors, they're going to get this chip. And then, so you just gave it to 2 teams. And I'm with you. I'm like, being here standing competitive is kind of a lot. It means a lot, right? And I'm not saying you're the champion, but respect. Like, a lot of things can happen from here on out, but to be in this fearsome state as a team has to be noted. And I'm with you.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And I don't think like championship or bust necessarily. I'm really talking about the perception and how things can be validated in such an undeniable way with a chip, unless it happens in a bubble and it happens to be the title that gives you more than Boston.
The most difficult chip ever, the tallest hill ever climbed by an NBA team.
In that case, it's really a fraudulent chip if you're the Lakers and you won the purest form of basketball championship that we've ever seen. But kind of this idea that there are these 8 teams now who are vying for this championship, and how it plays out will complete storylines, right? In the same way we said, if Giannis doesn't beat Brooklyn because KD's toe is in the line, our perception of Giannis is totally different.
Yeah.
And, we can look at some of the likelihoods of how things will shake out this year. But, thus far, it's interesting that Denver has looked so great because, Jokic was a leading MVP candidate, and people turned against him for various reasons.
People. Which people?
The media.
The PMM, the Joel Embiid Nation.
The all-powerful Sixers media.
But it was successful. Like, what they did with Jokic towards the end, masterstroke of media manipulation, right?
But also, it was the easiest solution for everyone.
I agree. Yeah.
It made sense in context. It didn't create any difficult conversations. And then it also puts Embiid in a position to get roasted if he goes out there and is hobbled and misses some games. Like, same old Embiid.
So deflated. Yeah.
Doesn't make it out of the second round. He's injured in the playoffs again. You got your MVP. Shut up. Like, there is an agenda that this works with. Again, it was the easiest solution for everyone. And it would be funny, however, if people got shamed out of voting for Jokic and then he just like steamrolls his way to a title. There are a lot of interesting, funny outcomes depending on what your agenda is out of these 8 teams.
And the matchup is we're finding out a little bit in that first game against KD and the Suns. Like, Jokic was just like, he's a good player, man. Even when he's not at his best, that team just kind of revolves around him, right? Like, in a way that's different than the Golden State Warriors in their Hamptons 5 heyday. In the great teams that have an MVP caliber player, Denver's so different. Like, there's not another star on that team. Jamal Murray withstanding, like, I don't think anyone knows what he is, but I don't see him as a player as good as Devin Booker.
He's put together some really awesome playoff performances over the course of his career.
For sure.
And some of those were in the bubble, so you got to know, how do they even count?
Better, higher level.
But he has been a very good playoff performer overall. I mean, he looks like a star right now in the 6 games. I mean, he's averaging, 28, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
Like, he's been fantastic. And this is a guy who was not that good this season.
Yeah.
By like metrics, he had league average efficiency. He's not much of a defender. He's okay on offense. He's shook out as like a pretty good player. And in the playoffs,
that's fair.
He has been,
pretty good.
He's played like a superstar. Mm-hmm. Huge numbers, efficient. But again, we're 6 games in. We'll see how that keeps going. He does have a track record of playing well in the postseason, though.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I kind of wanted to bring up to pull out a little bit from the micro of this series and talk about Jokic and MVP and like the funny things you talked about. Like it would be these these paths that these stories could take, right? Like, wouldn't it be funny if Jokic just won a championship after all that? Wouldn't it be funny if Embiid wins MVP but doesn't get on NBA first team? And I was sitting there doing nothing, done watching Super Mario Brothers on my smartphone, drenched. And I was like, is this the worst this NBA media has ever been? And I'm like, I don't know. Mike Lupica wasn't great. Like, the Vesey family didn't offer us that much. Like, even, when Bill Simmons was doing his sports guy thing, like, that was cool. I was a big fan of that. But, like, I don't know if it's ever been fantastic. But I feel like overall, the way we talk about sports on social media, the democratization of ideas and all this stuff, etc., yada, yada, has made us smarter as a whole. But I do feel that the ESPN and TNT are grasping at numbers and ratings that, like, these thinkers are just so bad. And, like, I was thinking about Giannis and what Giannis was saying and Jokic, watching him play the Suns. And I'm like, if Perkins is going to come out and say Giannis is an abject failure, you voted for him for MVP. So can Giannis say, like, but it's a success because you thought I was the best player? And it's like, well, no, you're not, because you did not go far in the playoffs. Then I'm like, why should you have a vote for MVP? What the hell is Nikola Jokic? We've been tricked into thinking that he's like a turnstile on defense. That's not his strength. But he is surely an MVP candidate. A great one. If not the MVP.
Well, I mean, to me, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, without even going down into the Jokic
I love Joel.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone seriously thought that there was any other candidate besides Jokic and Joel.
Except JJ Redick and Kendrick Perkins. Like, people voted for Giannis. Like, what the hell is that?
Right. I just mean that to me, and this is no slight towards Giannis, who is a great, great player. He just wasn't there with Giannis. I'm sorry, with Jokic and Embiid this year. He just wasn't.
Gamblers knew this year. Gamblers knew Giannis was not having a good one, so you kind of you skip over him. It was the turnovers and shooting. He was not good at shooting. Ton of turnovers.
I mean, if you want to put him 3, that's totally cool. But there wasn't a serious argument for him over
Jimmy Butler, in my opinion.
I mean, I think Giannis is fine at 3. He's awesome, but
there should not be 3. There should just be 2. Well, why 3? Right?
right. But I don't know. Like, I'm not sure which playoff matchups there are to talk about here. But let's, instead of talking about Sixers Celtics from a strategic standpoint, because we don't know if Embiid's gonna play in the game 1, let alone game 2. We just don't know. And other than presuming that Paul Reed will dominate that series, other than, I mean, obviously, but a bit, outside of that, what do we know? But I want to talk a little bit about, the Udoka going to Houston and the continual rumors about Harden wanting to go back there. Rumors about Jaylen Brown being coveted by Houston and having a tight relationship with Udoka. I think
something's cooking in Houston, man.
Something's cooking, and
they have the second and third best odds, number 1 overall.
What's interesting about them is they did a wholesale, rebuild in the same way that OKC did.
Yeah. And
they were able to trade Harden and get future assets, but they haven't really gotten anything out of those yet.
Yeah.
And OKC was able to sort of, hemorrhage more of their viable NBA caliber talent to get future resources from other teams than Houston was. But Houston definitely has some of that stuff. I look at their roster, and this is why I think Harden and Jaylen Brown going there is a legit threat, because if I'm Udoka, I feel like I'm going to have a choice at a lot of different places to coach. He's really number 1 as a candidate.
True.
And we look at that roster and you say, hey, dude, do you want to come coach Sengun, Jalen Green, and like Tari Eason?
Smith.
You're like, no. Okay, do you want to coach Jaylen Brown and James Harden and some of those guys? Like, okay, now I will listen to you.
Right. And also, no income tax. And the other sweet job is in Toronto, but you have to live in Canada. Shout out to Toronto. And that roster is kind of in flux in a different way. And, it was a poorly kept secret that Kevin Porter Jr. and Silas did not mesh, and that locker room was fractured, to say the least. But
I just feel like if you're going to someone who is as credentialed as Udoka, who is going to have the opportunity to coach
season,
a plum job somewhere, and you say, want to take over this team that was 27th in offensive rating, 29th in defensive rating, and 28th in net rating, you got to be offering more than just a good contract. You got to say there's a plan in place here.
Perhaps. I agree. And I don't think...
Whether that succeeds, different question. That doesn't mean they're going to get Jaylen Brown and James Harden, but that's got to be a selling point. It was reportedly something that they brought up to every coaching applicant.
Yeah. And knowing James Harden, I would not be shocked at all. What we know, I think it is a strong possibility. And, there's 3 teams that might get Wembanyama equally, 14% or so. And that is such a valuable strategic piece that they can even package one of these players. Like, can you imagine how much of a return a top 3 pick and Jalen Green would get? Like, what? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot going on in Houston to like, and it could happen in a flash, as we're seeing. And conversely, and I think Daryl Morey is my favorite general manager. Conversely, the Sixers could be in a different place very quickly.
I mean, you look at that team, and you're going to have to pay Maxey a ton of money, and then Tobias Harris's contract will come off the books, but that's after next year. So you're looking at that team as if Harden leaves, as pretty much being the exact same team next year, with Embiid, Maxey, Tobias Harris, and some pieces. I think what's a bummer as a Philly fan is that under Doc Rivers and I think you can bring this up with Morey too, is that they just have not really developed much talent internally, and that was something that I really assumed would be happening more frequently, with Morey as GM, and they had some of those guys, and we know that
totally fair. Maxey's a good player.
No, Maxey was a great find.
Yeah.
But just that the end of the bench, they just have not done that thing where you find guys and you give them G League experience, you work them into the rotation, you see who can stick, and I do feel like you can continue to do that while still being a contender. But Doc Rivers doesn't like to do it, and I think that to me is Harden potentially leaving is really more ominous because they have dedicated so much of their team bandwidth to guys who Harden likes having there. To having guys like Trez and Tucker and House and these guys who were part of his old Rockets team, or dogs that Joel Embiid wants to have around. And they went and they've let multiple young guys, whether it's Thibault or Isaiah Joe, guys who are decent pros, just walk out of that door for very little. And if Harden goes, they don't really have like a next generation of talent that they've been cultivating. And I think that is what magnifies this. If you were caught between giving 35-year-old James Harden, who has looked very worn down this season, even more so than last year in my opinion, a long-term lucrative deal, you might say, no way, dude, be out, because we've got next man up. We've got these guards that we've been working into the rotation that with Maxey and other players who are ready for a larger role, but they haven't done that.
I know. And Morey, I trust Morey. into like he's gonna figure this out if this happens. But I don't think a championship is certainly on the table this year if Embiid can play. But next year, knowing Embiid is brittle as an AD might be, and knowing that you've let go of a top 10 player in the NBA like Harden, like the championship is no longer on the table, I think.
We'll see. I just don't know the extent of his injury. Hopefully, he's somewhat playing possum. My skepticism towards the Sixers making a deep run into the playoffs is always based on Doc Rivers. And this year, I think some of those concerns are compounded by the fact they just don't really have many point of attack defenders on the team. This has been going on for a couple of years now, where Philly has always felt more pear-shaped than it should. They've got two guys who have won 5 of the last 6 scoring titles, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it still doesn't feel like they've sorted out what kind of team they're supposed to be. They are never sharp-edged or like, blade-like. They're never mean-spirited. It's just part of this is Tobias Harris and the fact that he just remains this constant presence as like an average, like dead center, like how do we describe him? Like Joe, what's his name? Joe Blogg.
Joe Blogs. Yeah.
Joe, he's just Joe Bloggs that is there on every big moment. He has been there playing as many minutes as their stars, and this has been going on for this is the 4th year where it's like he's just this unshakable Tobias Harris presence out there, and I think he is a big part of it. They just can't become a fine-tuned killing machine with Doc Rivers and Tobias Harris like in the fold. It just won't happen.
No. I don't trust Doc Rivers to make adjustments like the sharper coaches in the league, even Tom Thibodeau, but especially like an Eric Spoelstra, who was just like, guys, I'm going to give us a chance to win the game. I'm going to hurt some feelings along the way, but like, do we want to have a chance or not? And I think Doc, whenever we see him in a big spot with the Sixers and they're against the ropes, he's like, well, you guys just don't have that dog in you. And I'm like, play Matisse Thybulle, dude. Oh my God. I don't know. Rotations.
Again, yeah, we'll see. Like this whole conversation is sadly probably moot anyway.
Yeah.
If Joel isn't 100%. And I guess
no team can win without their best player at this point.
And I think the part that's like disappointing is that, in Doc's first season when they lost to Atlanta, people scapegoated Simmons. Danny Green got hurt, and Doc was able to survive that collapse. Last year, they went against Miami, who was not that good, and were like easily dispatched. But Joel had a broken face, so Doc survived. And this year, if they lose to the Celtics and Joe misses a couple games, I think Doc will be back.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
I don't know how you get rid of a guy when there are built-in excuses who the Stars team clearly wants there, because he will have won back-to-back scoring titles, been an MVP finalist 3 years straight. As long as Joe feels like Doc is letting him be the man and there's an excuse to keep him, I have trouble believing that Rivers is going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I think this, I don't want to be fatalistic, but this could be the last version of like a dangerous Sixers team for a while. Harden and Joel Embiid is no joke. Like, that's a crazy duo. But Joel's injury just kind of like gasses the whole thing, man. I'm just disappointed because I'm a huge Joel Embiid fan. Same idea with Jimmy going down, Randall. Like, it sucks that we're in the playoffs and the teams have survived this far, and then you drop the martini on the way to your table. It's just like disappointing.
Yeah, without getting into more Sixers stuff, to me, the dream of that squad that had Jimmy, Ben, and Joe. I mean, I loved that team.
Yeah.
At the time, I said, I really think this team has the core of a contender, and people kind of laughed at it. People weren't, yeah, and surprisingly so. Not everyone, but there were people who always were skeptical of Ben, people who were always skeptical of Jimmy, and I was like, this is 3 incredibly good two-way players. I believe that you could just put a couple parts around them, a couple 3D guys, not Tobias Harris, but a couple guys, and that team to me was like, that was so joyful to watch that team. I loved that squad.
That was the one.
That was, to me, that was the one. You keep those guys together, and you just see what happens. And whatever people feel about it, like the individual personalities, it doesn't matter. You're just keeping that core together until the wheels fall off. Like, that's what I would have done.
They'll move the goalposts.
Anyway.
Yeah, goalposts get moved constantly. We just don't talk about it. It's just like, well, they didn't win the championship. Well, they didn't win 2. They didn't win 3. He wasn't the MVP of the finals. Like, it just changes, like, I don't know.
You know who never changes goalposts?
Cookies.
There remains one. It's perfection. Sorry, I cut you off. It was the perfect ending.
I agree.
I love cookies.
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 I love cookies. I love cookies.